My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask you for pardon of my sins and grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father, Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. We are coming to the end of the liturgical year. Next Sunday will be the Feast of Christ the King and the last Sunday of Ordinary Time, and then the following Sunday will be the first Sunday of Advent. And that is actually, in the Church's calendar, a new year. We're beginning a new year. What the Church is doing at this time, especially these last weeks of the liturgical calendar of Ordinary Time, the Church is teaching us a very important lesson. Just as the year is passing away, so too all things will pass away. That's the lesson that the Church is trying to get us to learn these days through the Gospel readings and so on, the liturgy. The world is passing away. Not to get too worked up about the things here below. In the Gospel of today's Mass, we have the scene where the apostles visit the temple in Jerusalem, and they are ogling. They are amazed at the beauty of the building and the complex of buildings, which is the temple. And while they're there, we're told in the Gospel how they marvel at the wonderful blocks, the building blocks, these wonderful stones, which you can still see today, some of them remaining in the Wailing Wall, the Western Wall in the temple, and other parts of the temple that remain. And they, even now, 2,000 years later, are really stunning. And so the apostles are there marveling. This is incredible, Lord, they're saying. And Jesus comes over to them, and he says something to them that is stunning and shocking to them. And that is that our Lord says to them, all this that you see here, not a stone will remain on a stone. It will all be destroyed. Now, to understand that, actually, I think for us Catholics, we might make a comparison. And it would be like if you were visiting Rome, and you were your course would be visiting St. Peter's Basilica, and you would visit the Vatican Museums and the Sistine Chapel. And like everybody there, the thousands upon thousands of people go through there, you marvel at it. What buildings, what beautiful pieces of art. Look at the Sistine Chapel. Look at Michelangelo's frescoes. Look at the Pietà. Look at the wonderful building, St. Peter's Basilica, inside. Look at Bernini's work, all this, marveling. And if somebody would say to you, excuse me, but did you know that this is all going to be pulled down? It's all going to be destroyed. Well, we wouldn't believe it, and hopefully it wouldn't be true. But that is how the apostles must have felt when Jesus was saying this would all be destroyed. And furthermore, they think this must be at the end of time, but in fact it's not. This is only 40 years hence. Because 40 years later, there's a revolution in Jerusalem, in Israel. The Romans send Titus, who becomes Roman emperor during his campaign. He lays siege to Jerusalem. They resist, probably too much, and he goes in to teach them a lesson. And in the process, deliberately or accidentally, it's not very clear, the temple is burnt down, and the Romans finish off the job and completely destroy the temple. So, a really tragic event for Israel. But even that, what our Lord is saying to us in the Gospel, even something as dramatic as that, should not lead us to a kind of despair, or lead us to forget about eternity. We should weigh up even something as dramatic as that in the light of eternity. The Church uses, the theologians use a little Latin phrase, which is sub specie eternitatis, which literally means under the vision or under the light of eternity. or sometimes we say, with the eyes of eternity. In other words, that we see and judge everything with these eyes of eternity. In the light of eternity, how important is this? So, for example, if you're in traffic and you're beginning to lose your cool because you're getting all the red lights and people are pulling in front of you and all this, you could stop and say, what? Not stop your car, keep going, but stop and think, how important is this traffic jam in the light of eternity? Interesting. If you have a big exam or you're getting very worried about something, as a financial problem or something, it's good to stop and say, okay, this is troubling. But in the light of eternity, in 20 million years' time, when I'm looking down on all this, with the grace of God, from my place in heaven, what value does this have? That's to see things in the light of eternity, not to get too worked up. It's passing. You remember, I'm sure, Saint Teresa of Avila's famous lines where she says this: "Let nothing disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. All things are passing away. God never changes. Patience obtains all things. Whoever has God lacks nothing. God alone suffices." Very good lines. She's essentially encouraging us to see things with the eyes of eternity. And when that happens, we won't get so flustered. She has this other very famous comparison, and where she compares this life to a bad night in a bad inn. Now, I don't think she's being harsh in this life. She's saying, in comparison with the next life, in comparison with heaven, when we look back, we say, oh my God, that was like a bad night in a bad inn, but just one night, and no more. So we shouldn't get too worked up about it. It's just one night, one bad night in a bad inn. So all the troubles and tribulations, not that our life is full of troubles and tribulations, but it has a share, some share of them. They should never take away our peace, because we see them with the light, under the light of eternity. Another little point about that is two little things. One, not to exaggerate the troubles. There's a little proverb which says that when in a forest a tree falls, everybody hears it, but nobody hears all the other trees growing quietly. In other words, the disaster, the really difficult thing in our life is very apparent. It seizes our attention. It grabs us. And it looks like the end of the world. That's one tree falling. But there's hundreds, thousands of other trees making no noise, quietly growing. And that is the case in your life and my life. We could ask our Lord, help us to see that. Help me to be aware of the thousands of trees quietly growing, not to be overly fixated on the one tree that has dramatically fallen to the ground with a crash. That's one thing. The other little thing I wanted to kind of suggest to you is that looking at things under the eye, with the eyes of eternity, and we think, well, what value then do things have? If all these things are passing away, my exam, my job, everything that I hold dear, it's all passing away. What value does it have? Well, it's a good question. And the value that it has depends on you and me putting love into that action. Driving in that car in the traffic, put love into it. Say a little prayer, maybe now, for the people in the cars around you. Offer up the trials and tribulations of a morning traffic jam. If you're on your way to school or to your college, again, you transform it into something eternal by putting love in there. So then it becomes not something that's passing, but something that remains for eternity, because love remains for eternity. We'll finish up and ask Our Lady, who we can imagine never lost her peace. She sometimes suffered greatly, but without losing her peace, without losing that vision sub specie eternitatis, with the eyes of eternity. So let's ask Our Lady that we, like her, would never lose our peace and would always give the eternal value to things of love. I give you thanks, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask you for help to put them into effect. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.